Amina never chose to be a hero. She was just a hungry girl with dust on her ankles and calluses on her palms, walking the thorny path of Omalua, when fate collapsed at her feet, a stranger gasping leg, turning the color of night. She didn't know his name. She didn't know his world. She only knew the sting of venom and the weight of a life slipping away. With nothing but a strip of cloth, trembling courage, and a prayer, she fought death and won. Days later, engines roared, secrets gathered like storm clouds, and a promise meant for the savior slipped into the hands of a pretender. But truth has a stubborn heartbeat. It remembers a scar shaped like a crescent moon. It remembers kindness, and it always finds its way home. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Drop your city and local time in the comments. If you love stories of courage, justice, and second chances, hit subscribe and join our African Stories family. The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty footpaths of Omalua village, turning the ground into powder that rose with each step. Amina dragged her feet along that path, the weight of her old basket pressing against her thin shoulder. Her stomach had been empty since yesterday, yet her Aunt Kemi's voice still rang in her ears. Go to the farm or the family will starve. There was no space for pity in that house, only chores and endless scorn. Amina once lived in a world filled with love. She remembered mornings when her mother plaited her hair, her father humming while stirring egg, stew the purple school bag she carried with pride. But that life shattered in the blink of an eye when a car crash stole her parents away. At only 14, she had been sent to live with her father's brother Baba Tayo and his wife Kemi. At first their smiles promised comfort, but once the little inheritance left behind by her parents ran out, Amina became little more than a servant. Kemi's daughter Zuri enjoyed painted nails, new shoes, and idle laughter, while Amina worked until her hands blistered. School was denied to her. Why waste money on a girl who's not mine? Kemi snapped the morning she barred Amina from joining Zuri. And so Amina's world became sweeping compounds, carrying water and fetching yams while watching life pass her by. On this scorching afternoon, she thought only of finishing the chore and enduring the insults that awaited her at home. But destiny had its own script. Just as she turned a narrow corner between tall bushes, her eyes caught something unusual, a form lying across the path. At first, she thought it was a sack of cassava fallen from a farmer's cart. But when she moved closer, her breath caught in her throat. It was a man. He was sprawled in the dust, his shirt soaked in sweat, his leg twisted unnaturally. His lips were pale, his eyes fluttering like a candle in the wind. Then she saw it, 2 puncture wounds on his swollen calf, darkened veins crawling up his skin. A snake bite. Her basket tumbled from her grasp as she knelt beside him. Oh God, she whispered, her voice trembling. No one was around, just the hum of cicadas and the relentless Sunday. She thought of running for help, but the man's shallow breathing tethered her there. Memories from an old science book flickered in her mind. With shaking fingers, she ripped a strip of cloth from her wrapper and tied it above the wound to slow the venom. For a heartbeat, she froze. Then instinct overcame fear. She bent down, pressing her lips to the wound, sucking the poison with all her strength and spitting it into the dirt. The taste was metallic, bitter, but she did not stop. Her stomach churned, her eyes watered, yet she fought the bile rising in her throat. Every second mattered. When she could do no more, she pulled his arm over her small shoulders, her body bending under his weight. Step by step, she dragged him toward the dirt road. Sweat poured down her face, her breath came in painful bursts, but she clung to him as though his life depended on her stubbornness alone. Finally, the road stretched before her, and with the last of her strength, she staggered into the village clinic. Help, snake bite, she screamed, her voice tearing through the air. 2 nurses rushed forward, lifting the stranger onto a bed, but just as they prepared the antivenom, the matron adjusted her glasses and said flatly, Deposit first. 5,000 naira. No money, no treatment. Amina stared in horror. Please, he's dying. I will pay later. The woman shook her head. This is not a charity home. Panic surged through Amina. She had nothing, not even a coin hidden in her torn slippers. She bolted out of the clinic and ran to the small hut of her only friend, Hope. Hope was pounding yam when Amina burst into the compound, desperation etched into her face. Hope, please, I need 5,000. A man is dying. Snakebite, she panted. Hope's pestle froze midair. Without hesitation, she dropped it and rushed inside. Moments later, she returned with a bundle of notes. This is my mother's pepper soup money. Bring it back, Amina, please. I swear I will, Amina cried, clutching the money. Back at the clinic, she slapped the bundle onto the counter. The nurses exchanged looks, then hurried into action. The man's veins were injected with anti-venom machines, whirring as his life clung by a thread. Only then did Amina's body collapse into a chair, trembling from exhaustion. She glanced down and noticed something near the stranger's bag, a small pendant, a wooden charm carved with the letters KM. She picked it up instinctively, tucking it into her wrapper for safekeeping, unaware it carried the mark of destiny. By the time she returned home, the sky was burning orange with sunset. She had only 2 miserable tubers of yam in her basket, hardly enough to fill a pot. The moment she stepped into the compound, Aunt Kemi's sharp voice cut through the air. "Where have you been, useless girl? Chasing village boys?" "No," Auntie Amina whispered, dropping the basket at the door. Kemi's eyes narrowed. "If you come back pregnant, don't enter this house." Amina lowered her gaze, swallowing her tears. Inside, she cooked dinner, served her uncle, her aunt, and her cousin, and finally crawled into her dark, tiny room. Her body was broken, but her heart was restless. She thought of the man lying in the clinic bed, his life hanging by a thread, and of the pendant now hidden in her wrapper. She could not explain why, but something deep inside told her this was not the end. That night, while the rest of the household slept, Amina lay awake, listening to the crickets. She imagined the stranger's faint heartbeat, the look of his pale lips, and the warmth of his skin against her shoulder as she dragged him through the bush. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know that his name was Kaido Mensa, heir to a vast empire, a billionaire whose signature alone moved millions. She only knew that tomorrow, when the sun rose again, her feet would find their way back to that clinic. Because sometimes even the poorest girl beaten down by life carries within her the power to rewrite destiny. The morning sun crawled lazily over the palm trees of Omalua, spreading a golden haze across the village roofs. Amina's arms ached from yesterday's ordeal, but her mind was far from her chores. As she balanced 2 yellow jerry cans and made her way to the public tap, she thought of only one thing: the stranger she had carried to the clinic. Her Aunt Kemi's harsh voice echoed in her memory. "Useless girl, don't you dare waste my time again." Amina bit her lip. She knew if she delayed too long, punishment would follow. Still, her heart tugged at her feet, steering her away from the tap and down the dusty road that led to the small village clinic. She could not resist. Inside the clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic, mixed with the damp of old walls. Nurses bustled past her without a second glance. Amina slipped quietly through the corridor until she reached the ward where the stranger lay. He was still there. His body rested weakly on the thin mattress, an IV dripping into his arm. His skin was less clammy now, though pale. His eyes fluttered half open as Amina tiptoed to his side. For a moment she hesitated, clutching her wrapper. Then she whispered, "Hello, my name is Amina. You don't know me, but I brought you here yesterday." The man stirred lips, parting with a faint murmur. It was gibberish, his voice hoarse, his words broken. His head fell back onto the pillow and his breath steadied into shallow rhythm. Amina sat quietly by his side for several minutes, watching the rise and fall of his chest. Something about him filled her with an odd mixture of awe and sorrow. She adjusted the blanket covering his leg, making sure it shielded the swollen bite. Then, with a soft sigh, she slipped out unnoticed. The next day she returned, and the next after that. Every morning after finishing her chores or pretending to Amina sneak to the clinic, she would bring whatever scraps she could manage, leftover Gary and soup, a small calabash of porridge, or even just plain water. She sat beside him, speaking softly, even if he didn't answer, wiping sweat from his forehead, fanning him with her scarf, when the heat became unbearable. The nurses soon grew used to her presence. "That's the girl," one whispered, "the one who dragged him here half dead." Some of them pitied her. Others only shook their heads at her tattered clothes, whispering that she was wasting time on a dying man. But Amina never listened. One humid afternoon, as she arrived with a plate of rice, she had begged from her friend Hope. The stranger's eyes flickered open. They fixed on her with surprising clarity, and his lips moved. "Phone," he rasped. Amina startled. "You want a phone?" He nodded weakly. She ran to the nurse's station, pleading for a handset. After hesitation, one attendant handed her a phone. She placed it gently into his hand. With trembling fingers, he dialed a number from memory. Amina didn't stay to hear the conversation. She stepped back quietly, giving him privacy, and slipped out into the hot air of the clinic yard. She didn't even know his name, and perhaps she would never know. In her heart, she told herself, I was just meant to save him. Nothing more. But destiny, stubborn as it was, had other plans. 2 days later, the silence of the clinic was shattered by the roar of engines. Dust rose in clouds as a convoy of black SUVs, sleek and intimidating, rolled into the compound. Villagers froze mid-step. Even the goats scattered from the road. Men in suits stepped out, adjusting earpieces, scanning their surroundings like bodyguards in a foreign movie. The head nurse nearly dropped her tray. Who are these people? She muttered. From the largest car emerged a tall, stern-looking man in a crisp suit, followed by a well-dressed woman holding a clipboard. Behind them trailed two other attendants carrying leather cases. Their polished shoes made no sound on the cracked clinic tiles as they marched in. "Where is he?" the man demanded. The village doctor stumbled forward, confused. Who do you seek?" "Our boss, Kaito Mensa," the assistant replied. "CEO of Mensa Group. He was admitted here 3 days ago after a snake bite." Gasps rippled through the staff. One nurse nearly fainted. Another whispered, "A billionaire, sleeping in our ward." The team stormed into the room, confirming their boss's identity. Within minutes, orders were flying. A private doctor checked his vitals, new medications were unpacked, envelopes of cash were handed to the stunned local staff. The quiet clinic had transformed into a palace. As Kaito's people prepared to transfer him to the city hospital, his voice broke through, faint but insistent. "There's someone I haven't seen." His assistant leaned closer. "Who, sir?" "The girl. The one who saved me. Find her." The nurse tried to calm him. "Sir, please rest. We'll take you home first. You can thank her later." Kaito closed his eyes, too weak to argue, as they lifted him carefully into the car. Within moments, the convoy sped out, leaving a cloud of dust hanging in the air. Minutes later, Amina arrived at the clinic gate with a bowl of beans and plantain balanced on her hip. She stopped dead, sensing the unusual silence. Inside, the ward was empty. She turned to a nurse in confusion. "The man, the one bitten by the snake. Where is he?" The nurse sighed, almost in disbelief. "His people came, rich people, billionaire. They carried him away just now in convoy. You didn't see. The cars were so many, they shook the whole street." Amina's lips parted, but no sound came. The bowl trembled in her hands. He was gone. Without a word, without a goodbye. That evening, she walked to her friend Hope's hut. Hope was scrubbing clothes in a basin when Amina arrived, her eyes heavy. "He's gone," Amina said simply. Hope dropped the wet wrapper back into the basin. "Gone as in dead?" Amina shook her head. "No. His people came. They took him away. He is rich. A big man. They carried him off in jeeps." Hope threw up her hands. "Just like that, after all you did. And my mother's money, do you think he'll remember us?" Amina lowered her eyes. "I will repay you, little by little. He is alive. That is enough." Hope studied her face, then sighed. "You're a better person than me." Amina tried to smile, but it never reached her eyes. That night, as she crawled onto her thin mat, the pendant with the letters KM pressed against her chest, she whispered to the darkness, "Whoever you are, I only pray you live." What she did not know was that far away in the heart of Eco City, Kaito Mensa was waking in a private suite, his body surrounded by machines, his life wrapped in luxury, and his mind haunted by the memory of a girl with trembling hands, a soft voice, and a scar shaped like a crescent moon. The air in Omalua was heavy with the scent of roasted maize and dust as the days rolled by. Amina had slipped back into the rhythm of chores, her body moving on instinct, but her mind was no longer the same. Each time she bent to sweep the compound or carried water on her head, her fingers brushed the hidden pendant she kept beneath her wrapper. The carved letters KM glinted faintly whenever the cloth shifted, as if whispering a secret she was not meant to forget. Meanwhile, far away in Eco City, Kaito Mensa's recovery was swift under the hands of the best doctors money could summon. His suite did not smell of sickness. It smelled of lilies, leather, and polished marble. Nurses rotated in shifts, private chefs prepared gourmet meals, and fresh flowers were delivered daily. Yet none of that filled the emptiness pressing against his chest. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw her, the girl who bent over him, her lips trembling as she drew poison from his leg, her scarred hand pressing the cloth into his skin. He had not even thanked her. One morning, with his strength restored enough to sit without assistance, Kaito summoned his trusted aides Tunde and Zara. Their loyalty stretched back years, and he knew they would move mountains for him. "I need you to return to Omalua," he said, his voice low but steady. "Find the girl who saved me. Her name is Amina. She is the reason I breathe today. Bring her here. I intend to marry her." Zara's eyes widened. "Sir, do you mean it? You wish to marry a village girl you barely know?" Kaito's jaw tightened. "I know enough. She gave me life. Now I want to give her mine." Without hesitation, they obeyed. That very week, the convoy of black SUVs once again thundered into the narrow village roads of Omalua. startling chickens, scattering children, and drawing neighbors to their doorways. Dust rose as the cars stopped before the compound of Baba Tayo and Kemi. The sight was almost surreal. Kemi stood frozen at the doorway, her wrapper stained with palm oil from the stew she had been stirring. Baba Tayo shuffled out from the back, chewing slowly on cola nut, his eyes bulging at the spectacle of city people in fine suits. Villagers whispered among themselves, "Who are these visitors, politicians? No, it must be something bigger." Tunde stepped forward with a practiced smile. "Good afternoon. We are here on behalf of Mr. Kaido Mensa, CEO of Mensa Group. A few days ago, he was bitten by a snake near the farm. He was saved by a young woman named Amina, your niece. He has sent us to thank her personally." Kemi's jaw slackened. Baba Tayo blinked, unsure whether he was awake or trapped in a dream. Zara added gently, "Our boss intends not only to thank her, but to take her as his wife. He has asked us to present bride price and arrange for her hand in marriage." The words struck like lightning. A marriage proposal from a billionaire for Amina. Kemi's heart pounded like a drum. She turned quickly to her husband, her eyes blazing with greed. In an instant, she dragged him into their bedroom, shutting the door tightly. "Do you hear this, Tayo?" she hissed. "Do you understand what this means? Our family will join with wealth beyond measure. This is our chance." Baba Tayo rubbed his bald head nervously. "But Kemi, they came for Amina. That is who saved him. That is who he asked for." Kemi's lips curled into a sneer. "Who cares? Amina is nothing. She is a burden, a curse we've carried too long. Do you think we will allow her to reap this blessing while our own daughter wastes away? No. Zuri will take her place. Look at her, same age, same frame. The city people won't know the difference." Her husband frowned. "Kemi, this is deceit. It will not end well." She leaned closer, her eyes gleaming. "And what are the roof repairs you've been whining about? The debts you cannot pay? Do you want to die in poverty while Amina climbs into silk sheets? Open your eyes, Tayo. This is destiny knocking." Before he could reply, she stormed out and called loudly, "Zuri, come here." Zuri emerged, her nails freshly painted, her eyes curious. "Yes, Mama." "You will pretend to be Amina," Kemi declared. "You will be the one to marry this man." Zuri gasped. "But Mama, he might know. What if he asks questions?" Kemi waved off her doubts. He was unconscious most of the time. He never saw her face clearly. All he remembers is a voice, perhaps a touch. "You can mimic that. You are beautiful. You will wear Amina's wrapper. Speak softly, lower your gaze. Soon you will be his wife, and our lives will change forever." Zuri hesitated, chewing her lip. "And if he discovers the truth, by then it will be too late," Kemi snapped. "Bride price paid, marriage sealed. He cannot return you. Do you understand?" Slowly, Zuri nodded, though fear flickered in her eyes. Within the hour, she was dressed in Amina's faded wrapper, her hair tied simply, her face painted with an air of false humility. When she stepped into the courtyard, Zara and Tunde exchanged approving glances, believing they had found the right girl. Bride price negotiations began immediately. Lists of yams, goats, rice, palm oil, and cash were drawn. Envelopes exchanged hands. The compound buzzed with sudden wealth. Meanwhile, Amina was far from home. Kemi had cunningly sent her to clear the back farm and weed another man's field for a small fee, ensuring she would be absent when destiny arrived at her doorstep. Bent over rows of cassava, sweat dripping down her brow, Amina had no inkling that her life was being stolen piece by piece back in the compound. By sunset, Zuri had accepted gifts, smiling shyly, as though bashful before her new life. The villagers clapped and sang, gossiping about the poor orphan who had suddenly risen into fortune, never realizing it was the wrong girl standing in the spotlight. When Amina returned home that evening, her basket filled with weeds and dirt, she sensed the strange quiet. Normally, her aunt barked orders the moment she entered, but this time Kemi greeted her with an unusual sweetness. "Welcome, Amina," she cooed, her eyes too bright. "I hope there was enough water at the tap today." Amina frowned at the sudden change in tone. Her uncle avoided her gaze, and Zuri was nowhere to be seen. Whispers leaked from behind closed doors, plans muffled by heavy walls. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. That night, Amina lay awake on her thin mat, clutching the pendant with the letters KM. She could not explain why, but her chest ached with unease. Somewhere deep inside, she knew her fate was twisting in the shadows of her own home. And while she slept dreaming of the stranger she had saved, Zuri was being polished and prepared to step into the role that was never hers. The following morning dawned with the sound of drums echoing faintly through Omalua. Amina, awakened before the rooster's cry, was handed a cutlass by her Aunt Kemi. "Go to the back farm," Kemi ordered sweetly, her voice dripping with false calm. Clear the weeds before the sun gets high. When you're done, head to Chief Oak's field. He promised me 3,000 naira if you help him weed today. That money will cook our dinner." Amina blinked in surprise. The unusual gentleness in her aunt's tone made her uneasy. She wanted to ask questions, but swallowed her words. Defiance never ended well. So she tightened her wrapper, picked up the cutlass, and walked out silently, her feet dragging over the dusty path. Behind her, the compound stirred with a very different energy. Kemi rushed to the kitchen preparing dishes, while Baba Tayo fumbled with his best wrapper, muttering complaints about the heat. Zuri sat quietly in a corner, her hands trembling as her mother adjusted her scarf. "You must remember," Kemi hissed in her ear. "Today you are Amina. Speak little, lower your eyes, and let them see your humility. This marriage is your destiny. Don't ruin it." Zuri nodded, though her heart pounded so loudly she feared others might hear. By mid-morning, the convoy from Eco City returned, rolling into the village like a storm. Black SUVs gleamed under the sun engines, purring as they parked before Baba Tayo's compound. Villagers rushed to the roadside, craning their necks for a glimpse of the spectacle. Children squealed, women whispered, men shook their heads in disbelief. Never had Omalua seen such wealth at its doorstep. Inside the compound, canopies were already being erected. Chairs lined up caterers from the city, unloading crates of drinks and trays of jollof rice. The smell of roasted chicken and spices floated in the air. It was a scene fit for royalty, yet the true heroine of the story, Amina, was miles away, hacking weeds beneath the unforgiving Sunday. As the ceremony unfolded, Zuri stepped forward in a borrowed wrapper, in veil, her hands trembling, but her face painted with forced shyness. Zara and Tunde smiled approvingly, convinced they had found the girl their boss longed to marry. The elders of the village nodded, bride price lists were presented, and envelopes of cash exchanged hands. Songs filled the air. Drummers beat their instruments until the dust rose in clouds. The laughter of neighbors mingled with the crackling of firewood as women stirred pots of stew. By the time the sun began to sink toward the horizon, the deed was done. Zuri had been accepted as Amina, her hands adorned with coral beads, her head bowed as blessings were pronounced. She was whisked into one of the black SUVs, driven away in a convoy that left Omalua trembling in awe. At that very moment, Amina trudged back home, her basket heavy with weeds, her wrapper stained with dirt and sweat. The evening breeze carried faint echoes of drums, but she thought little of it. Festivals and weddings were not uncommon, though her aunt had not mentioned any such event. As she neared the compound, her friend Hope came running, breathless, eyes wide with urgency. "Amina, where have you been?" Hope gasped. "At Chief Oak's farm," Amina answered, confused. "Why are you running like the sky is falling?" Hope clutched her wrist tightly. "You don't know. Your cousin got married today." Amina froze, her basket slipping from her grip. "Married Zuri. To whom?" Hope's voice tumbled over itself, filled with disbelief. "Rich people came from the city, big cars, bodyguards, everything. They said they came for you, Amina. They said you saved their master's life. But your aunt, she gave them Zuri instead. The whole village is buzzing. They think Zuri is the savior. She's gone now in their jeeps." For a long moment, Amina could not breathe. Her chest felt hollow, her ears rang with silence louder than drums. She whispered almost to herself, "Nobody told me." As if to mock her, the convoy roared past them on the narrow road heading back toward the city. The cars were sleek, tinted, and powerful, leaving a trail of dust in their wake. Amina blinked through the haze, her heart sinking as she realized the truth. The chance, the recognition, the reward that fate had whispered into her hands gone stolen, snatched from her by the people she trusted least. Hope squeezed her hand. "Amina, I'm so sorry, it isn't fair." But Amina could not respond. She simply picked up her basket and walked home, each step heavier than the last. When she reached the compound, the celebration had already ended. Chairs lay scattered, empty bottles littered the ground, and remnants of food clung to plates. Kemi stood in a shimmering gold lace wrapper, beads around her neck, smiling with the triumph of someone who had conquered destiny. Baba Tayo puffed his chest beside her, chewing cola nut, as though he were a king. Amina paused at the gate, staring at them, her voice quiet but sharp. "Congratulations, Auntie. Congratulations, Uncle." Kemi's smile widened, though her eyes gleamed with contempt. "Thank you. Your cousin just got married to a great man. You had better start thinking of your own husband. We cannot feed you forever." Her words cut deeper than any blade. Amina lowered her gaze, whispering nothing. "Now clean up this place," Kemi barked suddenly, her sweetness vanishing. "The compound looks like a dustbin." Without protest, Amina dropped her basket, picked up a broom, and began sweeping. Her hands shook, but not from exhaustion. She swallowed her rage, burying it deep. If tears gathered in her eyes, she blinked them away quickly. Crying only gave her aunt more ammunition. By nightfall, when everyone had gone to sleep, Amina sat alone in her small dark room. Her knees pulled to her chest, her back pressed against the cold wall. In her palm lay the pendant she had hidden all along the wooden charm, carved with KM. She rubbed her thumb over its grooves, whispering to herself, "I know the truth, and the truth never hides forever." She did not know how or when, but something deep inside told her this deception would not last. Destiny was not so easily stolen. Far away in the glittering mansion of Eco City, Kaito sat upright in his hospital bed, awaiting the arrival of his bride. His heart beat fast, his thoughts filled with the girl whose bravery haunted his every dream. When Zuri was led into his room, draped in elegance, he stared at her in confusion. His smile faltered. His breath caught. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. The girl before him was not the one who had saved him. The eyes were different. The voice, the presence, even the smell of her perfume clashed with the memory that burned into his soul. But for now, the world celebrated. The wrong bride had been chosen, and the real savior was left in the shadows of Omalua, clutching the last piece of evidence that might one day restore her stolen destiny. The grandeur of Eco City's hospital suite was unlike anything Zuri had ever seen. Marble floors gleamed like mirrors, crystal chandeliers rained light from the ceiling, and fresh lilies perfumed the air. She entered with her head bowed, trying to hide the tremor in her steps. To the doctors and staff, she was introduced as Amina, the village girl who saved Mr. Kaito Mensa's life. But in truth, she was an actress in her mother's cruel play. Kaito's heart leapt the moment the doors opened. He had waited impatiently, eager to finally see again the girl whose trembling hands and soft whispers had kept him tethered to life in that tiny village clinic. But when his eyes fell on Zuri, his anticipation dissolved into confusion. She was pretty, yes, well-dressed and adorned with coral beads. But something was missing. Everything was missing. He remembered the scar shaped like a crescent moon on her rough palm, the smell of smoke and palm oil lingering in her hair, the raw kindness in her voice. This girl before him wore perfume that stung his nose, and her manicured hands bore no scars. Kaito frowned, leaning back against his pillows. "Who are you?" he asked bluntly. Zuri's heart skipped. She bowed her head lower. I am Amina," she said softly, rehearsing the lie her mother had forced upon her. Kaito studied her, his eyes sharp, his chest tightening with unease. His mother, Mama Grace, rushed forward, her wrapper flapping as she clasped Zuri's hands warmly. "My daughter," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. "God bless you for saving my son. You are part of this family now." Kaito opened his mouth to object, but his father, Chief Mensa, cleared his throat. "Son, you asked us to bring her?" "We did. Show some gratitude." Kaito swallowed his protests. He was still recovering, still vulnerable. Perhaps he thought the haze of venom and drugs had clouded his memory. Perhaps he was imagining details that never existed. Yet deep inside something screamed, "This is not her." Days turned into weeks. Zuri basked in the luxury of the Mensa estate, pampered like a queen. She strutted through gilded halls, servants bowing low chefs, preparing her favorite meals, and tailors delivering silk gowns. To the world, she was the poor village girl whose courage had captured a billionaire's heart. But Kaito kept his distance. He watched her carefully, every move, every word, searching for fragments of the girl who had knelt beside him in the clinic. They never came. Instead, he saw vanity in her eyes, impatience in her tone, greed in her hands as she reached for jewels and perfumes. One evening, Zuri entered his room carrying a tray of steaming food. She placed it gently on the table and smiled shyly. "I made this for you, my husband," she said, lowering her gaze. Kaito lifted the lid. The stew smelled rich, spiced with city herbs. He picked up a spoon but paused. "What is this?" "Egusi soup," Zuri replied confidently. Kaito's eyes narrowed. "The girl who saved me used to bring me gari and soup so watery it barely filled the plate. She fanned me with her scarf when I was too hot." She spoke gently with no perfume clinging to her clothes. His gaze hardened. "You are not that girl." Zuri's hands shook. She forced a laugh. "Perhaps you remember wrongly, my love. You were unconscious fevered. Memories play tricks in sickness." Mama Grace entered at that moment, breaking the tension. She smiled at Zuri warmly. "Leave him be, my dear. He is still weak." Zuri obeyed, relief flooding her chest, but Kaito remained restless. That night, alone in his room, he sat by the window, the city lights twinkling below like a carpet of stars. He clenched his fists. "No," he whispered to himself. "I remember her. The scar on her palm, the ash in her hair, the quiet courage in her voice. This woman downstairs is not Amina. The days grew colder between them. Zuri tried everything new, dresses, soft songs, warm meals. But Kaito barely looked at her. He avoided her touch, his heart locked elsewhere. To the staff, it became obvious the marriage was a cage, not a union. Servants whispered in corners, gossip spreading like wildfire. Back in Omalua, Amina continued her life of hardship. Her Aunt Kemi treated her more harshly than ever, perhaps out of guilt, perhaps out of cruelty. Each time Amina returned from the farm, her body aching, her aunt sneered at her. "Do you think your destiny is to sit in fine cars? Look at you, dirty ragged. You belong here." Amina said nothing. She only clutched the wooden pendant tighter each night. But fate has a way of stirring truth from the shadows. One morning, Kaito could no longer endure the lie. He called his closest friend and confidant. "Take me back to the village," he said firmly. "No convoy, no noise. I need to see with my own eyes." Dressed in plain clothes without his usual security, he returned quietly to Omalua. The journey felt surreal. His heart pounded as the dusty roads and crooked huts came into view once more. At the clinic, he asked the head nurse, "Do you remember the girl who brought me here weeks ago?" The nurse's face brightened. "Of course. Her name is Amina, Chief Tayo's niece. She was here every day caring for you when even we had no time. Without her, sir, you would not be alive." Kaito's throat tightened. "Where can I find her?" The nurse pointed toward Baba Tayo's compound. "That is where she lives." When Kaito arrived, he found Baba Tayo and Kemi seated under the mango tree, fanning themselves lazily, unaware of who approached. "Good afternoon," Kaito greeted politely. They looked up puzzled. To them, he was just another stranger. "Good afternoon," Baba Tayo replied cautiously. "How may we help you?" "I am looking for someone," Kaito said. "A girl named Amina. She lives here, I believe." Kemi stiffened. Her eyes darted nervously. "Why do you ask?" Before he could answer, she turned her head sharply toward the kitchen. "Amina, you snail, come out here. Someone wants to see you." The door creaked open and Amina stepped out wearing a faded blouse and a wrapper stained with palm oil. Her hair was undone, her palms rough from work. She held a wooden spoon in her hand, her eyes curious and wary. The moment Kaito saw her, his heart thundered. It was her. The scar, the voice, the very presence he had dreamed of. She was the one. "Good evening, sir," Amina said politely. "They said you wanted to see me." Kaito stared at her, overwhelmed. His lips trembled. "Yes, I came to thank you. You saved my life." Amina blinked, puzzled. She tilted her head. I only did what anyone would." But Kaito knew. His chest tightened with both relief and anguish. This was the girl, the true savior. And yet back in his mansion, another woman wore her name, her place, her destiny. As he walked away from the compound, his heart sank heavier with each step. "That is her," he whispered to himself. "That is my Amina, and I married the wrong girl." The war between truth and deceit had only just begun. The drive back from Omalua was silent. Kaito sat in the back seat of the SUV, his elbows pressed against his knees, his head lowered into his hands. The city lights drew closer through the window, yet his heart remained stuck in that dusty compound, in the image of Amina stepping out of the kitchen with a wooden spoon in hand. He could still see her scar, still hear the soft honesty of her voice when she said, "I only did what anyone would." No jewels, no perfumes, no false smiles, just truth. By the time he returned to his mansion, fury boiled beneath his calm surface. Zuri rushed to greet him, dressed in a sleek gown, her face powdered, her lips painted red. "My husband, you've returned," she exclaimed, stretching her arms toward him. Kaito stopped cold. His voice was steel. "Don't call me that." Zuri froze, her arms falling awkwardly. "What do you mean we are married? Your family accepted me. The bride price—" "Enough," he snapped, his voice thundering through the hall. Servants froze mid-step, their eyes wide. "You are not the girl who saved me. You are not Amina. You are an imposter planted in my house by liars." Tears filled Zuri's eyes. She fell to her knees. "Please, I beg you. I only did what my mother asked. Don't throw me away. I can be the wife you need." But Kaito turned his back, his jaw clenched. "I would rather die alone than live with a lie." He stormed up the staircase, his footsteps echoing like war drums. That night, Mama Grace entered his room, her face lined with worry. "Son, what are you saying? We brought the girl from the village. We honored your request. Now you are calling her a fraud. Have you lost your senses?" Kaito turned sharply, his eyes burning. "Mother, listen to me. I remember the girl who saved me. She carried me on her frail shoulders, fanned me with her scarf, fed me Gary with her trembling hands. She had a scar on her palm shaped like the crescent moon. The one downstairs has no such scar. She smells of perfume, not firewood. She doesn't know how to cook plain porridge, only rich stews. She is not Amina, and I will not be deceived in my own home. Mama Grace's lips trembled. But son, people already know you are married. Society will talk. Your enemies will laugh. Must you create a scandal? Let them laugh, Kaito said coldly. I would rather face their scorn than live in this lie. Weeks passed in tension. Kaito refused Zuri's meals, refused her presence, refused even to let her sit near him. She roamed the mansion in despair, her new clothes and jewels suddenly heavy with shame. Servants whispered and gossip spread across the city. The billionaire's marriage is cursed. Back in Omalua, Amina's life trudged on, as though nothing had changed. Her aunt Kemi barked orders daily, piling her with endless chores, while Zuri's absence only made the burden heavier. But late at night, when she lay on her mat, she fingered the wooden pendant inscribed with KM. Sometimes she stared at the half-torn hospital receipt she had hidden beneath her pillow, the one that bore her name and signature. Two tiny fragments of truth waiting like seeds to be planted. One evening, Hope rushed into Amina's hut, her eyes shining with excitement. Have you heard rich men from the city are back? They are asking questions again about you? Amina frowned uneasy. About me, why I did nothing special. Hope gripped her shoulders. Nothing special. You saved a man's life, and now he's searching for you. I swear, Amina, your destiny is bigger than this village. Amina smiled faintly but shook her head. My destiny is to survive, Hope. Nothing more. But destiny does not ask permission. It crashes in like a storm. A week later, Kaito returned to Omalua, this time not in disguise. He came with his parents, his aides, and a group of respected elders from Eco City. The convoy rolled into the village like thunder, drawing crowds from every corner. Villagers poured out of their huts, whispering, "The rich man has returned." At Baba Tayo's compound, Kemi's heart sank when she saw them approach. She scrambled to gather her wrappers, her beads, anything that might protect her from the fire she sensed was coming. Kaito stood tall before the gathered crowd, his eyes blazing. "Where is she?" he demanded. Baba Tayo stammered. "Where is who, sir?" Kaito pointed sharply. "Amina, the girl who saved my life. Bring her out at once." Kemi rushed forward, her voice high and desperate. "But she has gone to the farm. You must mean Zuri, your wife. She is the one." "Silence," Kaito roared. The crowd gasped. "You deceived me, woman. You clothed your daughter in lies and sold her to me. But the truth has eyes, and it cannot be buried." At his signal, Zara stepped forward, holding up the torn hospital receipt. "This is the record of the deposit paid for his treatment. It bears the name of Amina, not Zuri, not anyone else." The villagers gasped. Kaito turned to the crowd. "And more, she bears a scar on her palm, proof of her labor. That scar was before my eyes as I drifted between life and death. Where is she? Bring her to me." Just then, Amina appeared at the edge of the gathering, still holding a hoe from the farm, her wrapper stained with soil. She froze as all eyes turned to her. Confused, she stepped forward slowly. When Kaito's gaze fell on her, his voice softened to a whisper that carried through the silence. "There, that is her. My savior. My true Amina." The elders murmured among themselves. One stepped forward, his staff tapping the ground. "This is a grave deceit," he declared. "Bride price was paid under false pretenses. The union between this man and Zuri is void." Kemi shrieked, falling to her knees. "No, please, you cannot shame us like this. My daughter will be ruined." But the elders ignored her. Chief Mensa's voice thundered. "You disgraced your family and ours. You took wealth under lies. You shall return every coin, every goat, every tuber of yam. Today the truth is restored." Amina's heart pounded as the elders led her forward, her hands trembling. She wanted to protest, to say she was not ready for such a fate, but when she met Kaito's eyes steady and filled with gratitude, the words dissolved. He bent slightly, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "You gave me life, Amina. I will spend mine giving you yours back." The village erupted into whispers, some awed, some scandalized. But destiny had shifted again, dragging Amina from the shadows of servitude into the burning light of truth. And somewhere behind the crowd, Zuri watched with tears streaming down her face, her new clothes clutched like rags, realizing too late that stolen destinies never last. The compound of Baba Tayo shook like a storm that day. Villagers crowded under the mango tree, their voices buzzing with disbelief, while the elders sat on long benches, their staffs of authority planted firmly in the ground. Amina stood at the center, her palms damp, her heart racing, as eyes pierced her from every direction. She had never been the center of anything before, never the subject of whispers or judgments, but now her name flew from lip to lip. She is the true savior. She is the one. Kaito stood beside her, his presence like a shield. Dressed in a simple but commanding black tunic, his gaze never wavered from Amina, as though he feared she might vanish if he blinked. His voice cut through the noise. This girl carried me on her frail shoulders through the bush. She sucked venom from my leg, risking her own life. She begged and borrowed money from her friends so I could be treated. Without her, I would be dead. And yet you tried to erase her and hand me another in her place. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The elders shifted uncomfortably, their eyes narrowing at Kemi. Zara, Kaito's aide, stepped forward and displayed the half-torn hospital receipt. Here is proof signed in her name, Amina. She paid for the deposit with borrowed money. The matron confirmed it. No lie can bury this truth. Kemi's face turned red with shame and fury. She dropped to her knees, her wrapper dragging in the dust. Please forgive me, I only wanted a better life for my daughter. What mother wouldn't? One elder rose slowly, his beard white with age, his eyes sharp as blades. He struck the ground with his staff. What mother deceives the world? What mother sells lies in exchange for wealth? You have shamed not only your family but the entire lineage of Omalua. Your deceit is a curse upon your name. The villagers murmured in agreement. Someone shouted from the back. We all saw the convoy. We all saw Zuri pretending shame. Zuri herself stood trembling, her hands clutching her wrapper. Tears streamed down her face. She tried to speak, but words tangled in her throat. Finally, she dropped to her knees beside her mother. Please. It was Mama's idea. I didn't want to, but I... Her sobs drowned her confession. Kaito raised his hand, silencing the noise. His voice was steady but laced with iron. You deceived me. You mocked the bond of marriage. But know this, I never touched her. I never called her wife in truth. She was a stranger in my house, and I kept her as such. The words struck like thunder. The villagers gasped, their whispers rising like a swarm of bees. Mama Grace, Kaito's mother, stood now, her frame regal, in flowing blue lace. She pointed at Kemi and Zuri. You brought disgrace to your compound. You soiled the name of the Mensa family, but you will not triumph. My son will be joined only to the one who deserves him. Another elder lifted his staff. The bride price paid for Zuri must be returned at once. Everything: yams, goats, oilcloth, and money. This is the law. This is our custom. Baba Tayo groaned, covering his face with both hands. He knew the wealth they had received was already squandered, spent on wrappers, food, and favors. The shame burned hotter than the sun overhead. But Kaito was not done. He stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Amina. His voice softened, reaching only for her ears, though the crowd strained to listen. Amina, I came here not only to expose the lie, but to ask for the truth. Will you let me make things right? Will you stand with me? Not as my savior only, but as my partner. Amina's breath caught. She had never imagined such words directed at her. For years, she had been nothing more than a servant, a shadow in her aunt's house. Now this man, the man she had dragged through dust and sweat, was asking to give her a life beyond anything she dreamed. Yet fear coiled inside her. She whispered, I don't know. I don't know if I am ready. I have no education, no beauty like Zuri, no wealth. I am nothing. Kaito shook his head, his eyes fierce. You are everything. Courage is wealth. Kindness is beauty. Truth is power. You gave me all three. The crowd hushed. Even the wind seemed to pause. The head elder turned to Amina. Child, do you accept him? Do you accept this union witnessed today by all? Amina's lips trembled. She glanced at Kemi, who looked away in shame, at Zuri, who wept quietly into her palms, at her uncle, who still hid his face. Then her gaze returned to Kaito. His eyes held no lies, no greed, only sincerity. Yes, she whispered at last, her voice barely audible. I accept. The crowd erupted, some clapping, some cheering, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The elders nodded solemnly. Then let it be so, the head elder declared. The false bond is broken. The true one begins. Today we restore what deceit tried to destroy. The ritual was simple yet profound. A calabash of palm wine was brought, shared between families. Kaito offered it to Amina, and she sipped, her hands trembling as he followed. The elders pronounced their blessings, invoking the ancestors to guard this new union. Kemi wailed, beating her chest. My daughter will be ruined. She will never find another husband. But the crowd silenced her with glares. Shame was now her only companion. As the ceremony ended, Kaito took Amina's hand, gently raising it high for all to see. This is my wife, he declared. Not by wealth, not by deceit, but by truth. The villagers cheered louder, their voices rising into the evening sky. Some were still envious, but none could deny destiny when it stood so boldly before them. That night, as the convoy prepared to leave, Amina sat quietly in the SUV, staring out at the village that had both broken and birthed her. The same neighbors who once ignored her now bowed as the cars passed, whispering her name with awe. Zuri remained behind, collapsed in her mother's arms, her eyes empty. Kemi wept, but no tears could wash away the stain of their betrayal. Baba Tayo sat apart, silent, ashamed as kola nut, forgotten in his palm. For Amina, the journey had just begun. She clutched the wooden pendant with the carved letters KM now resting against her heart. She did not know what awaited in the vast city ahead, but for the first time, she felt the weight of possibility pressing against her chest, not as a burden, but as a promise. Beside her, Kaito reached for her hand. His voice was soft but firm. "You gave me life, Amina. Now I will give you everything life can offer. This I swear." And as the convoy disappeared into the horizon, the girl once mocked, as worthless, stepped into a new chapter, her name etched, not in dust but in destiny. The city of Iko opened itself before Amina like a dream stitched in glass and steel. Skyscrapers pierced the sky, their windows glittering in the sunlight. The roads pulsed with endless traffic horns, honking voices rising, and neon billboards glowing even in daylight. From the back seat of the black SUV, Amina clutched the pendant with KM carved on it, her breath quick and shallow. The only cities she had ever known were dusty marketplaces and tiny villages. This was another world. When the convoy rolled through tall gates of wrought iron, her eyes widened further. The Mensa estate stretched out like something from a tale, lush gardens, marble fountains, and a mansion with columns that glistened like ivory. Servants lined the driveway, bowing deeply as the cars stopped. To them, she was no longer the orphan village girl with torn slippers. She was Madame Amina, the billionaire's bride. But her heart rebelled. She whispered to herself, "I am still me, just Amina." Kaito stepped out first, his presence commanding. He walked around to her door, opened it gently, and extended his hand. "Welcome home," he said softly. His words carried no arrogance, only warmth. She hesitated before placing her rough palm into her scar, brushing his skin. His eyes softened at the touch, as if reaffirming to himself that this was the woman he owed his life. Inside the mansion dazzled her senses. Marble floors reflected her bare feet, chandeliers dripped with crystal fire, and golden-framed paintings lined the walls. Amina tiptoed forward, afraid to leave marks on the floor. Servants whispered among themselves, "This is the girl who saved Oga's life." Some looked at her with admiration, others with curiosity, but all bowed respectfully. That first night, Amina barely slept. She sat on the edge of a bed larger than the entire hut she once shared in Omalua, her eyes darting around the room as if it might vanish. Her hands shook as she folded her wrapper, unsure if she even belonged there. The next morning, Kaito knocked gently on her door. He found her sitting upright, still wearing her wrapper, her eyes wide with anxiety. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "I was just waiting to know what I should cook this morning." Kaito laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Cook, Amina, this is your home. You are not here to serve. You are here to live." She lowered her gaze, unsure how to respond. In her world, service was the only identity she had ever known. Later that day, over breakfast served by staff, Kaito asked her gently, "Tell me, Amina, what do you want for yourself if life had given you the choice?" Her spoon froze midair. Slowly she whispered, "I wanted to go to school. But after my parents died, there was no money. My aunt said it was a waste." Kaito leaned closer. "Then school it is. From today, nothing will stop you." True to his word, tutors were hired within the week. Amina was given books, notebooks, pens, even new glasses for her studies. At first, she struggled, her mind rusty from years of deprivation. But Kaito's encouragement was steady. "You carried me when I could not walk," he reminded her. "Now I will carry you until you can fly." Days turned into months. Slowly, Amina blossomed. She learned mathematics, history, English literature. Her tutors marveled at her determination. Each lesson felt like reclaiming a piece of the life stolen from her. For the first time since childhood, she allowed herself to dream. Yet not everything was easy. Outside the mansion walls, whispers grew. Gossip in Eco City spread like wildfire. A village girl tricked her way into wealth. Amina the gold digger, Amina the lucky servant. Newspapers speculated. Social media spat venom. Some called her Cinderella, others called her a fraud. Zuri's bitterness only fanned the flames. From the village, she began spinning tales. "That girl stole my life. She stole my husband." Her words slithered through channels, feeding the doubts of those already envious. One evening, Amina scrolled through a tablet, her hands trembling as she read cruel comments. She can't even speak proper English. She doesn't belong in high society. She trapped him with lies. Tears blurred her vision. Kaido found her in that state. He took the tablet gently from her hands and set it aside. Look at me, he said firmly. None of those voices matter. You saved me when no one else would. You are the truth in a world full of lies, and I will not let anyone rewrite our story. Amina nodded slowly, her tears softening into resolve. Then I will prove them wrong, not with words but with deeds. Her chance came sooner than she expected. During a charity gala hosted by the Mensa Foundation, Amina asked Kaido if she could speak. He hesitated at first, fearing the scorn of the wealthy crowd. But she insisted. Dressed simply in a gown without heavy jewelry, Amina stood before the glittering audience of politicians, business tycoons, and socialites. She told her story not as a fairy tale, but as a raw truth. I am Amina from Omalua, she began, her voice steady. I was not born into wealth. I was born into hardship. I was told my life was worthless, that my only destiny was to serve. But one day fate placed me before a dying man. I had nothing, no money, no strength, but I gave what I could. I gave my courage, I gave my hands. That is why I stand here today. Not because of luck, not because of beauty, but because truth cannot be stolen forever. The hall fell silent. Some eyes brimmed with tears, others with respect. The same society that had mocked her now rose to their feet in applause. Kaido's chest swelled with pride. In that moment, Amina ceased to be a shadow and became a voice, a symbol of resilience. Afterward, Kaito took her hand, whispering, Do you see now? You belong here more than anyone. Yet, shadows lingered. Back in Omalua, Zuri's envy burned hotter with every story of Amina's rise. In her bitterness, she sought allies among city dwellers who despised the Mensa family. She whispered lies, plans, schemes determined to bring Amina down. But destiny, stubborn and unyielding, had already chosen its path. For Amina was no longer just a poor orphan. She was becoming a woman of strength, a voice for others, a light too bright to be dimmed. As she lay that night in her new home, the pendant with KM pressed against her chest, she whispered to herself, I am not nothing. I am Amina, and this is only the beginning. The days in Eco City began to follow a rhythm, but nothing about Amina's new life ever felt ordinary. Every morning she rose early, still clinging to the habits of village life. Instead of sleeping late on silken sheets, she would sweep her room, water the flowers in the balcony garden, and kneel in prayer before the sun fully lifted itself over the city skyline. Servants begged her to rest, but she always shook her head. If my hands do nothing, my heart will grow restless, she said. Kaido watched her quietly. The world called him powerful, yet he marveled at how this young woman who had once carried water on her head through dusty fields could now carry herself with such grace among marble pillars. Still, he knew her path was only beginning. One afternoon, as they shared tea in the courtyard, Kaido asked her, Amina, now that you've started your studies, what would you truly like to do with your life? Her eyes lit with hesitation. She fiddled with the pendant around her neck, the wooden charm engraved with KM, before answering softly, I don't want to rise alone. I want the girls of Omalua and all villages like it to rise with me. I want them to have what I was denied, education, skills, hope. Kaido's lips curved into a slow smile. Then let's build it. A foundation, a program. Call it whatever you like, but let it be yours. Amina gasped. Truly, you would allow me. I will not allow you, Kaido interrupted gently. I will support you. The dream is yours to lead. And so the Roots to Rise initiative was born. Amina worked tirelessly with mentors and volunteers, creating scholarships for village girls, hiring teachers, and building a training center where they could learn trades like tailoring, agriculture, and computer skills. At first, the city elites scoffed. What does a village girl know about running a program, they sneered. But Amina pressed on, fueled by the fire of every insult ever hurled at her. She traveled back to Omalua with her team, speaking to families beneath the same mango trees where her fate had once been debated. Parents were skeptical. Girls belong in the kitchen, some muttered. But Amina looked them in the eye and said, Did the kitchen save a billionaire's life? Or was it courage and knowledge? Give your daughters a chance. Slowly, hearts softened. Girls began to attend. Their laughter filled the classrooms Amina helped build. And for the first time, hope flowed through the village like fresh water after a drought. Yet while Amina's light grew, Zuri's bitterness festered like an unhealed wound. After being cast aside in disgrace, she left Omalua and fled to the city. There she fell into the company of restless young men who thrived on gossip, envy, and scandal. Together they plotted to smear Amina's name. She is no saint, Zuri hissed one evening, her eyes sharp with venom. She tricked my mother, my family, and now the whole country. She pretends to care for the poor, but she only wants power. Help me expose her. The men grinned, smelling opportunity. Within days, false stories surfaced online. Headlines screamed village girl steals billionaire's heart, and fortune blogs claimed Amina had bewitched Kaito, that she was a fraud, using charity as a mask for greed. Even doctored photographs appeared showing her in places she had never been. At first the storm shook her. She sat at her desk, tears streaming, as she scrolled through the hateful lies. Maybe I should step back, she whispered to Kaito one night. Maybe the world isn't ready for me. But Kaito took her hands firmly. The world was not ready for me either, Amina. When I built my empire, they called me reckless. When I gave jobs to the poor, they said I was wasting money. Lies are shadows, truth is the Sunday, and the sun always rises. Her resolve hardened. She doubled her efforts with the foundation, inviting journalists to witness the work firsthand. They filmed the classrooms, the farms, the girls learning to read for the first time. Soon, stories of her impact drowned out the rumors. What had begun as whispers of doubt turned into applause of respect. Still, Zuri was not finished. In her desperation, she involved herself with a man who promised revenge, but only sought to use her pain for his own schemes. One night, Amina received word Zuri had been arrested after being caught in a fraud scandal. Despite everything, Amina's heart softened. She went to the police station quietly and paid for her cousin's release. Zuri stared at her in disbelief, shame and confusion swirling in her eyes. Why would you help me? She choked. Amina's voice was calm yet firm. Because bitterness is a prison, Zuri. I will not leave you there, but I will not allow you to chain me there either. Choose better, or you will drown yourself. Zuri wept, but said nothing. For the first time, she began to see the chasm between the woman she could have been and the woman Amina had become. Back at the mansion, Amina's foundation continued to grow. She started new projects, clean water wells in villages, mobile health clinics, and a program to teach rural communities how to treat snake bites and other emergencies. The irony was not lost on her. The same venom that nearly killed a stranger had birthed a mission to save many. Yet even amid her triumphs, she faced trials. High society women whispered behind their fans, mocking her accent, her simple gowns. Politicians tried to manipulate her projects for votes. There were nights when she collapsed onto her pillow, tears soaking the sheets. But each morning she rose again, whispering, I am Amina. I am more than what they say. And beside her always was Kaito. He never once wavered, never once allowed her to doubt herself without reminding her of the truth. On the darkest nights, he would trace the crescent-shaped scar on her palm and say, this mark is the seal of destiny. It is the sign that no lie, no betrayal, no gossip can erase who you are. Years later, when Roots to Rise celebrated its anniversary, thousands gathered in a stadium to honor her work. Girls from villages across the region stood proudly holding books and certificates. The air vibrated with songs of gratitude. Amina stepped onto the stage, her heart swelling with emotion. She took the microphone, her eyes scanning the sea of faces. Once I was told my life was worthless, she began. I was told girls could only fetch water and sweep floors. But today I see warriors, leaders, dreamers. You are proof that destiny belongs to those who refuse to bow to lies. The stadium erupted with cheers. Kaito stood in the front row, clapping until his palms stung his eyes, never leaving hers. For Amina, the journey from a village path to a city stage was not the end. It was the opening of a new chapter. She knew challenges would come, enemies would rise, and storms would rage. But she also knew this truth: she was no longer the girl dragging her feet through dust. She was a woman who carried the power of truth, courage, and grace, and she would never let it be stolen again. The city lights outside flickered like restless stars the night Amina received news that would test her heart once again. Zuri, broken by scandal and betrayed by the very people who had used her bitterness, had fallen gravely ill. She lay in a rundown clinic on the edge of Eco, her body weakened, her spirit hollow. When word reached Amina through a whispering neighbor from Omalua, she felt the weight of her cousin's suffering press into her chest. Kaito watched her carefully as she folded the letter in silence. You don't have to go, he said gently. She chose her path. Amina's voice was soft but steady. If I do not go, then I am no different from those who mocked me when I was nothing. Blood may betray, but it still calls. The next morning she traveled quietly to the small clinic. The room smelled of iodine and damp plaster. On the narrow bed lay Zuri, her once proud eyes dulled with defeat. She turned her head slowly, disbelief flickering when she saw Amina standing in the doorway. You! Zuri croaked, her voice fragile. Why are you here to see me ruin, to laugh? Amina moved closer, setting down a parcel of food and medicine. No, I came because pain should not be faced alone. I came because once I was left to carry burdens with no hand to help me, I will not do that to you. Tears rolled down Zuri's cheeks. I hated you, Amina. I wanted your life, your place. And yet even after all I did, you still helped me. Amina reached for her hand scar, meeting smooth skin. Hatred is poison, Zuri. I learned that saving a man from snake venom, if poison remains, it kills the body. If hatred remains, it kills the soul. Let it go, or it will consume you. For the first time, Zuri broke down completely. Her sobs filled the small room, her hands clutching Amina's as though they were her last tether to life. That day, a seed of healing began to sprout. When Amina returned to the mansion, Kaito met her at the door, his expression unreadable. She told him what she had done, expecting reproach. Instead, he cupped her face with his hands and whispered, "This is why I love you. You forgive even when the world would condemn. You see light even in those who wronged you." Months passed and Amina's life wove itself between public triumphs and private challenges. The Roots to Rise initiative grew into a network of schools and training centers across villages. Her work earned her invitations to speak at international forums, where she told her story with humility and fire, reminding the world that heroes are often hidden in the poorest places. Yet Amina never allowed herself to be carried away by fame. Each evening she returned home, removing her shoes at the mansion door, sitting on the balcony with Kaito, and eating simple meals of yam and stew. She told him often, "I don't want to forget the taste of where I came from. It keeps me human." Their love deepened not with extravagance, but with quiet promises. One evening, as the sun bled gold into the horizon, Kaito knelt before her in the garden. In his hand was no diamond ring, but the same wooden pendant she had once carried from the clinic floor. He had set it into gold, preserving its carved letters. "Amina," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "this pendant was once a lost trinket lying unnoticed. You carried it, not knowing it marked my name, just as you carried me not knowing who I was. Now I ask you, will you let me carry you in wealth, and in hardship, in peace, and in storm for the rest of our lives?" Tears blurred her eyes. She whispered, "Yes, not because of gold or power, but because of truth. You are the man I saved and the man who saw me when no one else did." Their wedding was not a spectacle of diamonds and chandeliers. It was held in Omalua beneath the mango trees where everything had begun. Elders blessed the union, villagers sang, and children danced in circles. Even Baba Tayo, humbled by shame, but softened by time, stood quietly at the edge, tears rolling down his cheeks. Kemi sat beside him, her face lined with regret, whispering prayers under her breath. When Amina walked through the village in her simple ivory gown, holding Kaito's hand, the people bowed, not to her wealth but to her story. She had risen from dust to destiny, carrying her truth like a banner. Years later, Amina became a mother. Her children grew up not in the shadow of luxury, but in the light of values. She instilled humility, kindness, courage. She often took them back to Omalua, showing them the tap where she once fetched water, the farm paths where she once bent her back, the clinic where destiny shifted. This, she would tell them, is where our story began. Never despise humble beginnings. They carry the seeds of greatness. As for Zuri, she found her own path. After recovering from her illness, she chose a quieter life, marrying a humble electrician who treated her with respect. Though bitterness still flickered in her from time to time, Amina's act of mercy had planted a seed she could not uproot. She never reached the heights she once craved, but she learned to live with dignity. In the end, Amina's legacy was not only in schools or programs, but in hearts. She taught her children, her village, and even her enemies that truth endures, that love heals, and that destiny cannot be stolen by deceit. And on quiet evenings, as the city lights shimmered and the world slept, she sat beside Kaito in the garden, the golden pendant resting between them. They spoke little, for words were not needed. Their silence was full of gratitude, for venom turned into victory, for betrayal turned into blessing, for a life once despised now crowned with purpose. For Amina had learned the greatest truth of all: sometimes the poorest hands carry the richest destinies. Dear friends, Amina's story is more than a tale of betrayal and triumph. It is a reminder that life can push us into the dust, but courage and kindness can lift us higher than we ever dreamed. Betrayal may delay destiny, but it cannot erase it. And wealth without truth is emptiness, while even poverty with integrity can open the gates of greatness. If you've ever felt overlooked or undervalued, let Amina's journey remind you, your worth is not defined by what others say, but by the light you carry inside. The scars on your hands, the hardships you endure, They are not signs of weakness, but marks of resilience. Before you leave, share in the comments what lesson touched your heart most in this story. Where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Let's build a circle of voices across the world. And if you want more stories of courage, betrayal, and redemption, don't forget to hit subscribe and join our growing family of African stories. Together, we keep these lessons alive.